Hello everybody and welcome to today's video where I'm going to be showing you how to add villager joins to your minigame. So what I mean by this is you'll see in so many different servers that have minigames where you can click on a player NPC or you can click on a certain entity to start a game or to join a game. Now obviously, unfortunately, player NPCs are not natively in the API and that's why they're covered in the NMS section. And I can't just do it very quickly here because unfortunately you need a lot of understanding of NMS and packets and how it works in terms of player NPCs to achieve that. And so if you really want to do that, that might be something fun to do afterwards. So that is covered in the NMS section. But in today's video, we're going to do a similar thing but just with villagers. Now this isn't uncommon. On many minigame servers I see, a lot of them have it so you can click on a certain type of entity to then join a game. Now we'll be using a villager today, and the cool thing about using a villager is that you can do things like you can set whatever outfit they're wearing, which is based on their profession. And of course we don't have to use any NMS or packets because villagers are an entity on the server. And so we can essentially just use some very basic events to hook up this whole system. So there's a few different steps we're going to use today to achieve this. So we're going to change it in the config.yml. If I go to resources, and you see in here, we have, of course, the spawn points for each of the arenas. I'm also going to make it so that the spawn points for the villagers are, of course, in here too, because each arena is going to need its own villager. And then we're going to write some code to load these locations that we put in, and make it so that each arena, if we go in the arena class, is going to have its instance of a villager. And then we'll set some properties of the villager, like we'll make it so it can't move around by itself, make it so that it's invincible, a few things like that. And then we'll have a listener. Now this listener is going to listen to the interact event, and so when a player clicks the villager, we'll do our action. And then of course our action for that is just to make them join the arena. And that's it. It's actually not a difficult topic today, but it's one of those that it probably is going to take about 20 minutes or so just to actually get all the code into our existing system. Now, as with all of these extra minigame videos, so basically anything besides the mechanics videos, I'm starting with the base of the full minigame that we completed. Now, if you just want to start with the base as well, then that is available on the GitHub, where we store all of the source code, which is always linked alongside this video. And that just means that if you want to integrate this with another one of the add-on videos, then you can do that pretty easily and you don't have to weed out any code. So I'm starting with the very base minigame that we created after the first 4 videos of this section, so you should see something similar. So the first thing we're going to do, as I said, is change it so in the config.yml, we're going to have the villager locations also. So this is just going to require a minor restructuring to our arenas configuration section here. So of course, we remember how this works. We have arenas, which is then going to be essentially an array of these different keys. So these are the keys, and then each one of these is the value. Now, what we're actually going to do is make it so that we can also store the player spawn, which of course is this, and then alongside the villager spawn under the same ID. So it's going to be very similar to how the rest of this is working. So what we'll do is I'll go enter one, make sure there's 2 spaces here, and then I'm going to do player spawn. And then with all of these, I'm going to press double space just before it, just like that. Now, it's very important that you make sure you do a double space and don't accidentally leave tab in. If you leave a tab symbol in, it could mess up your YML structure. So just make sure you do double spaces. So once we've got this structure here, you can imagine that we can go down 1 and then go back 1 and then do, for example, villager spawn. Perfect. And then I'll even copy and paste this. And then we'll just change the values to it in a moment. So I'll just put those as temporary values for now, just to indicate that I want to come back to this. Okay, perfect. Now I'm going to do a very similar structure to this one. So player spawn, and I'll give it double space. Just got to do it carefully just to make sure we don't mess up any of the formatting. And then I'll do villager spawn. Now, of course, you may want to pause the video now just to catch up a little bit, but I'm going to copy and paste this one here, just like that. And so now under each of the arenas, we're holding both the player spawn, which we've already logged, and the villager spawn, which we're about to log. So before we go and log that, I just want to give you one quick tip. Now, I've probably mentioned this a couple times throughout the course, but that's because it's a really useful trick. If you're slightly concerned, or even if you just want to be safe that your formatting here is correct and it's not going to break anything, what you want to use to verify this is something called a YAML parser. Now, of course, YAML is just the syntax language that we're using here. This is YAML format. And so a parser, all it's going to do is take your input and then essentially verify that it's correct based on the rules of YAML. So there's one that I've been using for many years here, and I'll link this alongside this video. All you do is you pop in your YAML there, so I'll do that. I'll press Ctrl A, copy all of this, and then paste it inside the left part. And then if you parse the YAML, you'll see there's not going to be any issues because I did it correctly. However, let me go and just break the formatting. So I'll do, let's just say I'll press Tab here. That's of course breaking the formatting. You see we get an error straight away. It tells us exactly where the error is. Now it does say that the error is on the next line as opposed to the one that I broke, and that's because of just how the formatting works. It's going to carry on the problem basically, but it'll be roughly where the error says it is, and it even says the exact issue and indentation problem. So if you want to verify that what you've done is correct, then come over to this website linked alongside this video, and then you can go ahead and check that. For me, I know that mine's fine. So the next thing I'm going to do is boot up my Minecraft and I'll start the server. So I'll hit run server, and then I'm going to go log these specific locations of where we want the villagers to stand around the arenas. So I'll see you guys in a second. Alright, so I've just spawned in, and I'm on my spawn location here, and I need to pick a place to put the villagers. So I'll just grab, let's just say we're gonna, in fact we'll just use glowstone for the villagers. So we'll say this arena villager can be here, and this arena villager can be there. And so we just need to log these locations. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna grab out the config.yml. I'm just gonna drag it away from any of the panes, and you'll see it'll come out as a separate window on your PC, which means I can have both of these open at the same time, just like that. So what I'll do for the villager spawn, so for arena 0, which based on the coordinates looks to be the first one that we set, right here, I'll just stand exactly where I want the villager to stand, so just like this, and then I'll get the coordinates. So it's going to be minus 282.5. Don't forget the 0.5, that's going to make him stand in the middle of the block. And then for the Y, that's going to be 64. And then for the Z, that's going to be 4.5. Now for the yaw on the pitch, remember that's this. So with this one, you can roughly round to the nearest 90 or 0 or 45, something like that. So for my yaw, I'll do minus 90. And then for my pitch, I'll do 0. So that'll mean the villager's looking basically exactly like this. Okay, perfect. So I'll go ahead and log the second villager spawn. So I'll head over to this one. And the coordinates are going to be very similar, just one of the X or Z coordinates will be different. So we'll go ahead and write this one in. So that'll be minus 282.5, just like above, 64, and the Z is now going to be 0.5. And then the yaw, minus 90 again, and then 0. Now, of course, this is going to completely depend on the map that you've made for yourself. This is my map, and so basically when you spawn in, you're going to have a villager there, and you can click on them to join the arena, basically. And this is quite a popular setup among minigame servers. So we can log out, and I'll close this out, and we can rest easy knowing that our config is now going to contain this information, like this. So what's the next step? We've added all of this information. The next thing we're going to have to do is, well, firstly, we're going to have to repair what we will have broken inside of the code by changing the structure of this YML file. And then on the back of that, we'll make it so that the arena instances all have access to their villager spawn location, so we can then spawn the villager. So I'll head to my arena manager, which I know is where I use the player spawns because we've changed the structure. Now, not to worry, there's not much to change. All we're going to have to do is look at the new path. So the new path is going to be arenas, and then ID, and then player spawn, and then whatever one of these keys it is. So we'll do arenas.id, and then .player spawn, and then whichever one of the keys it is. So we'll go ahead and copy paste this for all of them. So just after the key. Perfect. Now make sure that's correct. I'll be honest with you guys, 9 times out of 10 when I'm helping somebody fix their minigame code from these videos, they've almost always just messed this part up. A little period in the wrong place, a little typo will break everything, so make sure it's perfect. And so then the next thing we need to do is make it so that we have access to the villager spawn. So in a very similar way that we have for the player spawn, we of course need to know where to spawn our villager. Now I hesitate to do this, but I think we do need to get good at copy pasting. So what we'll do is we'll copy and paste where we create this location and just change the values from player spawn to villager spawn. But before we do that, so we don't get any compilation errors, we're going to actually just make it so we can accept that variable from this end. So we'll do private val, and instead of spawn, we're going to change this to player spawn. And for this one, we'll just do villager spawn, make that equal to a location also. And then inside of here as well, we'll spawn the villager, but of course we need to populate this spawn first. Now this is going to have caused one little issue, so we'll head down here. So when we add the player, we're going to teleport them instead to the player spawn, not just the spawn. Okay, perfect. So what we'll do now is head back to the arena manager, and you'll see now we've got a big error because we now need to provide it the villager location. So what we'll do is we'll make these parameters a bit tidier. So just like this. And then we're going to copy and paste this, and then paste it just like that, although with one more indentation. Okay, so we'll fix the parentheses here. It's going to get a little bit messy, but it will fix itself in no time. There we go. So we're getting a small warning because there's duplicate code. Of course, I've just copy and pasted it, so it won't be duplicate for much longer. So what I'll do is go ahead and change this player spawn to villager spawn, just like that. Now, I don't actually need to change anything else because, as you can see by the structure, the player spawn and the villager spawn are the exact same, so it's not a problem. So the world's already preset, and of course we just logged those locations. So what we'll do is, now that we've passed this location through, we can now access it from this arena, where of course we need to spawn the villager once the arena is created. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable here. I'll call it a val. Now, I'm not going to have an access modifier on it, so remember, all variables are public by default. What I mean to say is I'm not going to make it private or protected or anything like that, and that's just because before we end this video off, I'm going to go to the onEnable and make sure that when the server closes, we remove all of the existing villagers, and that of course just stops them piling up, otherwise we'd have loads of them. So I'm going to make this a public variable, which is by default, and I'll name this one villager. And I'll do equal villager spawn dot world dot spawn entity, and then we have to pop in the spawn location of the entity. So again, that's villager spawn, and then the second parameter is going to be the entity type. So we're going to do entity type dot villager, and then we're going to write as villager. Now we can do that cast, and that cast will always work because we know that we've just spawned a villager based on the entity type. So if what we do is we put parentheses around this here. Now, because of that cast, if we do .apply, within this apply block, you can see we now have access to the entity we've just spawned as a villager. Now, this is perfect because inside of here, we can then change loads of properties about that villager. Now, if you're a bit worried about this being a variable and not in, for example, an init block or a function, then don't worry. And the reason for that is because when the class instance is first created, it'll go through and it'll initialize all of these variables. So for example, when the class instance is first created, it'll make players equal to a new mutable list of player. So what I'm saying is when the class instance is first created, it'll make villager equal to the result of the spawn entity function, which of course, in the meantime, will spawn the entity. So that's not a problem. So inside of here, we're just going to change a couple things, and also a little thing, I can remove this val, and the reason for that is because, unlike the player spawn, we're not using it inside of functions. This is actually being used at the class top level. For example, if I was to do down here, villager spawn dot add 050, you'll see suddenly the val is needed. That won't be the case when we just use it in our variable initialization here. So we'll remove that private val, which just basically says we're only using it to initialize variables or in the constructor. So what we'll do now is add loads of properties to the villager. So these are going to be things that essentially dictate its behavior and how it works. Of course, in our case, we basically want the villager to be a dummy. We don't want him to move around or do anything particularly useful. So we're going to set a few different properties here. The first one we'll do is set AI, and we're going to make AI equal to false. Now, of course, the AI in this context is just its ability to move around and to think and to respond to things that are happening around it. So if we set that to false, that means it's going to be set in place and not cause us any problems. The second thing I want to do is adjust is collidable and make that equal to false. That'll mean that no player can push it, essentially. The entity doesn't accept any collision. Now, of course, it's a situation like this where you look at the fact that for the AI one, we have a function, and for this one, we're setting a variable. Now, of course, we've covered this a lot in the Kotlin fundamentals videos and different spots throughout the course. But it's always strange when you see it, and basically the reason is because Kotlin automatically turns any setters which are only setting the value of something to allow us to essentially adjust the variable without the need for using a set function, because it's messy and it's old Java stuff basically. But the function will still remain if it's going to do more code. So if it's running other things alongside just setting the internal variable, which in the case of some functions it absolutely is. And so that's the difference, so don't worry too much. Basically, just if you want to change something, just type in AI or collidable. You'll see, is it a function, is it a variable? You can definitely set it with one of those, so you'll find it eventually. So we've set the AI and the collidable to false, and now we'll set invulnerable to true. So I can do is invulnerable equals true. Now invulnerable just means, does it take no damage? It's essentially a synonym for invincible, and so we'll say true for that. And then next, we're going to set it so it has a custom name which is visible. So for that, we're going to do is custom name visible equals true. And then of course, you can guess what's coming next. We're going to set that custom name. So this takes a component as always. So we'll do component.text, and then let's do arena space and then the ID, which of course we have access to throughout this entire arena class. So that's the arena ID. Now, obviously, you can make this look however you want. I just want to put which arena it is, and then maybe a little call to action. So I'll say, click to join, or something like that. So we'll do that, and then I'll make it name text color. We'll make it green. Of course, if you want to use a hex code or anything, you're more than welcome to. And then why don't we just append another quick component? We'll do another component, component.text, and we'll just write click to join, and we'll make this one a name text color .gray. Okay, I put a space there, make sure you notice that, and basically this is just going to be green arena name and then gray click to join. That's similar to how you'd see it on any kind of big server. So just structure that how you want, be a bit creative if you want to, but otherwise that is, I think, is a pretty suitable title. Now, of course, because we have access to a villager and not just an entity, there's actually all of the villager-related stuff that you can change. For example, you can mess with things like the trading, or in our case, you can change the profession. So if I do profession equals, and then I can choose all of these different professions. Now, of course, in vanilla Minecraft, this actually changes how they behave, what trades they give, and, well, what we're going to use in our case, which is how they look. So let's say that for now I'm just going to make them both equal to farmers. So I'll make it so both of the villagers look like farmers. What you could even do if you wanted to stretch yourself was in the config.yml, you can make it so you can take a custom profession for each villager. That would be a fun thing to do and it would make them look different, but for us, we'll just have it so they're farmers, just so we can explore the concept of how a profession works. Okay, and then other than that, there's actually not anything else that I want to change about the villager. Of course, you're more than welcome to mess around with this, have a bit of fun, just break things and have fun, of course go for it, but for me, I think this is going to make our villager serve its purpose as a join villager. So that's essentially the first half. We've made it so that the villager is going to be there and present. Now the second half, we're going to make it so that we can actually listen to when somebody clicks on the villager and then put them into an arena. So what we'll do for that is create another listener. So we'll do a Kotlin class/file, and then you can kind of call this anything. I would kind of say something like join listener, but I'm kind of hesitant to do that based on the fact that it almost sounds like we're using the player join event, but we're not. So I think what I'll call it is the arena listener. And then if you wanted to add any more arena related events in here, you could do just that. So we'll make it equal to an instance of listener, head to our main class, and we'll go and register this as a listener. So register events, arena listener, and then this. It's also worth noting that, as you can see, we're using this register events line multiple times. I would generally say if you're going to do it a third time or any more times, then probably just use a scope function on register events. So you don't have to keep running this bit of code every time. but that's just personal preference. I think 2 is absolutely fine. 3, you should probably start looking into a scope function. Okay, so inside the arena listener, we need to use an event where we can listen to when any player clicks on our villager. There's a couple different events we can use here. So create the event handler, do function on, and I'll just put onX for now so we can explore the events. Now, one event that would do it is a player interact event, but that's just basically a catch-all event. I want a more dedicated event for when somebody clicks an entity. Now, you'll see we have 2 different entity interact events. We have the player interact entity event and a player interact at entity event. So at first glance, that looks a bit confusing. How do I know which one to use? And to be honest, they both actually sound like they do exactly the same thing. Well, in that case, what I would do is I would go to the Java docs. So I have them up here, and these are the paper Java docs. And what I would always do as a beginner is come to these Java docs and type in what you want to find in the search bar, and then you'll find the actual description of what this class is as described by a human. So we're not just reading the name, which can be a bit ambiguous. So for the player interact entity event, it says it represents an event that is called when a player right-clicks an entity. So I read that and I think, okay, perfect. That one sounds like the one. But then we read the player interact at entity event. I'll zoom in a little bit. And this one says represents an event that is called when a player right-clicks an entity that also contains the location where the entity was clicked. Note that the client may sometimes send this packet in addition to the player interact entity event. Users are advised to listen to this parent class unless specifically required. And so in which case we're going to take the advice of the Java docs. Of course, they made this API after all. And we will use the player interact at entity event. So basically these 2 events do almost the exact same thing, except this one just has an additional function to get the location of where the entity was clicked. Now that's not really relevant to us, we're not going to use that, but we will follow the advice to use this event over the other event. Now if you're thinking that this can be unnecessarily confusing, well, all I'd say is join the club. I agree with that completely, but it's just something we have to accept, and so we will do so. So we'll use the player interact at entity event. So I'll do on, player interact at entity. Now remember, you can always name this whatever you like. You could do on banana if you wanted. But for me, I think it's a nice convention to just name it the same as the event. So I'll do player interact at entity event. Okay, so we know that this event is going to be fired when they click on our villager. The only problem with this is that a player has 2 hands. And so this event is actually fired for each of those hands. Of course, there's no way to discriminate between whether a click was a main hand click or an offhand click, because you still use right click in both instances. And so this event fires twice, and in order to make sure we don't send them into the arena twice, we will have to just make sure that we rule out one of the hands. And so what we'll do is if e.hand is not equal to equipment slot.hand, then we're going to return. So we're just going to stop the code execution for the offhand. Now I realize there's obviously other equipment slots. There's offhand, hand, chest, etc. Those just refer to the actual equipment slots, so things like armor. Basically anywhere where you can hold some equipment. Now this event will only fire for the hand and offhand. So if we just make sure it's equal to the hand, aka for any code here, by ruling it out, if it's not, then this event is only going to run once. So that's perfect. Now, the next thing that we're going to have to, of course, do is essentially we need a way to get the arena from whichever villager they clicked. Now, yes, you may be thinking that, okay, we store the arena ID in the title. We could always use that. We'll just pull apart the title and get the ID. You absolutely could do that, but it's a bit messy and also it would be considered quite hacky. What would be best for us to do is just inside the arena manager, where we have this find function on behalf of the player, we'll have a find function on behalf of the entity that we clicked. So for example, if I do, down here, function, and we'll do find by villager. And then it's just general convention with these find functions. If you're going to do find by something, just write find by and then whatever it is. Now for the player, because this is the one that's used in almost every scenario, I'll just leave this one as find. But we'll call the find by villager one just like this. And then we'll take in a villager. And then we're going to return an arena, which could potentially be null if we didn't find anything. And then all we'll do is return arenas.arena first or null, very similar to the player one. And we just need to put in the Boolean condition, which if any of these return true, then it will then return that in the first or null. So we'll simply do if it.villager. That's why we didn't make that variable private before. We now have access to that from here. So if it.villager is equal to villager, then we will go ahead and return that. If it's not, it will return null. So that's perfect. So what we can now do from our listener is then run that function. Now the problem is that function takes a villager, and there's a reason for that. Firstly, I want to reduce the amount of casting that we have to do, but secondly, I also want to at some point rule out any entity that's not a villager. So to do that, we're going to do if e dot, and then unfortunately the entity that you click is called right clicked, and you see it returns an entity here. That's just another little quirk of the API. I've campaigned for it to be changed. It should just be e.entity or something like that. It shouldn't be right clicked. That's very strange naming convention. However, we have to live with it. So if e.rightclicked dot type is not equal to entity type.villager, then we're going to go ahead and return just like that. And then we'll just go ahead and run the function that we created. So what we're going to do is arena manager dot find by villager, and we're going to pop in e.rightclicked as villager, so we have to cast it. Now it's fine, we know that cast won't fail because we've done this little line of code here. And then we're going to do question mark dot let. Now .let is used in conjunction with this question mark to basically say we're going to run the code inside of here if whatever is to the left of it is not null. So if the arena exists, then whatever's inside of here will run, and as you can see, we're going to have access to the arena by calling it. If our function finds that the arena doesn't exist and it returns null, then nothing's going to run at all. So that's perfect. So what we can now do is use that arena to dispatch a command, then make the player join that arena. Now, what we could do is we could always do it.addPlayer and add them like that. But I don't really like that. And the reason for that is because if I look at the arena command and I look at the join function here, you'll see there's so much logic that we're checking for here. For example, you can't join while the game is live. If I just do .addPlayer, then I'm going to bypass all of this logic. And so, well, in layman's terms, it's going to break everything. And we don't want to do that, obviously. What I instead want to do, instead of running addPlayer, I want to make it so that they basically run this command in the background. Now, the player won't know they've run this command, but it does mean that we're going to benefit from all of the logic that we've created nicely here. So, in the arena listener, instead of running addPlayer, we're going to do bucket.dispatch command. Now, this is going to run a command on behalf of a command sender, or a player in our case, and it's going to run the specified command. So the player is going to be e.player, and then the command that we're going to run, have a guess, you already know what this is, very simply, arena, join, and then we're going to have to pop in the ID. So to get the ID, we're going to run it.id, just like that. So now this is going to run the command arena join, and then either 0 or 1 in our case. Which means then that's going to, of course, fall into the logic of this, and then it'll make sure when the player, for example, clicks into a game which is a live game, and of course they're not allowed to join, then it'll do the exact same thing and just send them this message when they click on the villager, just like as if they ran the command. So that's perfect. Now we don't actually need to put a slash here. I know, of course, in the way that commands work, you always put a slash, but we don't do that in this case because it pre-fills that by default. So if you wanted a double slash, like in World Editor, for example, then you would just put 1. But in our case, we have a single slash, so we'll have none. Okay, perfect. So I'm very happy with this event. This event is going to fire when somebody clicks on, well, any entity, and then we rule out the bad options. So the bad option is if it's not equal to the main hand, rule it out. If the entity is not equal to a villager, rule it out. And then, if we can find an arena from the villager, let's dispatch the command and let the player join the arena. Nice and simple, not a whole lot going on, and for the record, this is some beautiful, clean code with basically no nesting and follows all the conventions, so this looks great to me. Now, guys, basically, this whole thing is going to work. Just before we go and fire it up, though, I'm going to keep true on my promise and make sure that in the onDisable function, I'm going to remove all of the existing villagers. So I'll do override function onDisable. Now this function is going to fire similar to the onEnable when the server starts or when the plugin enables. This one is going to disable when the server closes, aka when the plugin disables. Now there is one caveat with this, is that of course if the server crashes, say you ran out of memory or it's crashed in some other way, then what you'll find is that this onDisable function won't always run. And that's why it's always recommended that when you close your server, you write the stop command, and you close it naturally as opposed to force closing it. That basically helps all of the plugins shut down. So of course, in today's video, just using the onDisable is a pretty solid solution, but if you really want to be careful for the instances where people are going to break your server by crashing it, then what you can do is, just in the onEnable, for example, make it so that you loop through all villagers and just get rid of them. Of course, do that before you spawn the villagers, but that'll keep everything clean. For us, just doing it in the onDisable is perfect for now. So what we'll do is we'll loop through all of the existing arenas. So we'll do arena manager.arenas.forEach. And for each of these, we're going to get the villager, and then run simply .remove on that entity. Now we don't need to do any cleaning up. For example, we don't need to remove all the arenas from the arena list or anything like that. And that's because, of course, the server is closing. So everything that was our plugin will be no more. So we don't need to worry about that. But we do just need to clean up our mess with the villagers because, of course, those do persist over the restart, whereas pretty much nothing else does. Okay, cool. I'm really happy with that, guys. I think we've done a solid job there. So I'm going to go ahead and go to Gradle, run server, and I'll see you guys in a second, and hopefully this is going to work. Alright, so I'm heading in now, and hopefully, there we go, we have the two villagers. So they each have the arena ID by them, Arena 0 and Arena 1, and then they have also the farmer, a profession that we set them to, which is really cool. So it's basically like a way of using player NPCs without all the mess of NMS and packets. You can actually just give these guys a nice costume so they look a bit different. Let's just say I'm going to go ahead and join Arena 1. So I'm going to click the guy, and you'll see you've joined the arena, and I'm now in Arena 1. And of course, everything functions like completely normal, like we did with our base mechanics minigame. I'll just do arena quit, and there you go. Join this one. Same principle, just like that. And guys, that is how to make villagers to join your arenas. I really hope this has helped. If you guys need any assistance, please come join our Discord. We'd love to guide you through this. But otherwise, of course, this source code is all available, and it's linked alongside this video. But I hope you learned a lot, so thank you guys, and I'll see you in the next one.